Good evening, viewers. Thank you for tuning in to Diversity Dignified. And if you've been watching this show, then you know it's about us trying to extend the proverbial olive branch to introduce you to transgender folks who are your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers. And we've gotten into more serious issues on my show. Tonight we have with us Zack Hawkins, and he does a lot of traveling, and he is going to bring up some experiences that he's had recently with the airports. And it occurs to me that this is becoming more and more of an issue. You're hearing all kinds of stories about unsavory experiences at the airport, and you might not consider, gee, what is that like for a trans person? And so we're gonna learn about that tonight. So thank you for joining us, and I'm gonna turn this over to you, Zack. And in the honor of my show, I would love it if you would introduce yourself to viewers. And while you're doing that, please tell us your pronouns, any credits that you want to put forth, and your transition story in language that you feel comfortable using.
I'm Zack. I use he, him pronouns. And basically, like, my background transition story was when I was probably 12 years old, I finally stumbled upon, like, the word trans, and, like, that there are trans men, like people who were born female and don't identify as such. And at this point in my life, I'd already been like really bullied for being different than like other kids. So rather than like being like, hey, this is me, I kind of just like shoved myself deeper into the closet and kind of started trying to like be feminine and just try and like force myself, because that's obviously what I needed to do. And then at 16, I came out at my school about being trans, which was really great. They helped me hide it from my family and stuff. And then that summer, I'd come out to my mom, which didn't honestly go too well.
Okay.
It was immediately just kind of like shoved down, don't talk about it, don't tell anyone else.
Can I interrupt you? So when you said you knew you were different and you were getting bullied, did you know this at a much younger age and you just didn't have the language?
I definitely didn't really feel like I fit into like femininity.
Okay, okay.
I guess that's the like best way I could describe it. I wasn't like, I am a boy, because I didn't know that's what I was feeling. Mm-hmm. And it definitely got worse more towards around the time of like puberty.
So when you got the language and you knew, was that helpful to you? I mean, how did
I think it was more terrifying than helpful.
Okay.
Like, I'm glad I realized that the word existed, but I didn't want that to be me.
Okay.
Because everything like I had seen and everything I saw online and around this word was just like bad stuff. So
In what way? What do you mean?
Just like negative and never kind of turns out well for people, and you lose everything around you, or you end up dead, or...
But I'm so glad you're bringing some of that up, because there's some truth to some of this.
Yeah, I mean, we have a really high chance of being murdered at any point in time. I think like...
1 in 8?
Though, yeah, it's like our life expectancy is like 25 years old or something.
Wow, I didn't know it was that low.
Yeah, it's like 20s.
Okay.
So kind of like all this stuff, I was just like, nope, I don't want to be that, so I'm gonna force myself to be feminine, and maybe that will
try harder.
Work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it didn't work.
No, it didn't, and eventually I did come out, and my family ended up disowning me. So I got emancipated. Once I got emancipated, I started testosterone, and I got my name changed. And this past week, I actually had my consult for top surgery to have a double mastectomy.
Okay. So it doesn't have to be a tragedy. Being transgender doesn't have to be a tragedy. How are things with your family now, your mom now?
My mom and I actually get along a lot better. I think she realized that it's okay to be trans, and I think at first she was just kind of really afraid of what that meant.
Sure.
And I think she was just kind of terrified of
Was she
what
afraid
would
of your
happen.
safety?
I think that was a big part of it, and I think a lot of it was also she just didn't understand.
Sure.
And I think every parent who has someone come out to them as queer, unless they're queer themselves, like their immediate response is like disbelief, like, no, that can't be my kid.
Right. Well, I've always maintained that unless you've struggled with your gender or your sexuality, why would you know about it? I mean, it wouldn't occur to you. So unless you know someone. So can I ask then, so you're emancipated, you're living on your own. It sounds like you travel a lot.
I do. So when I was 16, like a month before I actually came out as being trans, my mom moved to Florida.
Okay.
So around that time, I started traveling a lot. Basically, like every holiday time, I usually go down to visit my mom.
Okay.
So I've been traveling a lot, and a lot of the traveling I've done has been since coming out as trans.
Okay.
Which, like, airports are probably like one of my biggest like anxiety things, because every time I go through, I'm like, okay, which sensor am I going to set off this time?
And they're not good about their bathrooms either. I mean, they're very binary, aren't they, in the airports usually?
Yep.
Yeah.
I tend to have a layover, so I tend to fly into Atlanta, Georgia a lot.
Okay.
And I don't think there's anything more terrifying than walking into these huge bathrooms that are just rows and rows of urinals until you go to the way back. So you're just like passing all of these, this guy's like staring at you like you don't belong in here.
Right, right. Okay, so you travel a lot. It sounds mainly Florida, but other places as well. You're kind of a pro, but then something happened the last time you traveled.
Yep. I was actually on my way home from visiting my mom in Florida. I was going down to spend a week with her and check out the college that I got accepted into. And on my way home, my stepdad dropped me off at the airport. I got my ticket, and went to head up. I was flying out of Daytona International Airport, and they have 2 floors. So the first floor is where you get like your baggage when you land, or where you go and get your tickets and stuff to check in. And then you go upstairs to where TSA security is.
Okay.
So you go down when you come off like the escalator, and off to the side is, you know where you go like when you go through security, like where they check your ID and your
and then you go through the metal detectors and.
So it's like the step before the metal detectors, where they make sure that you're actually meant to be going through there.
Right, that you're in the right area.
Yep.
Okay.
So I was going through there, and I handed him my boarding pass and I handed him my ID, and he spends like a couple minutes like staring at my ID because my ID says female on it.
Okay.
So it says Zachary and then female for gender.
Okay.
So obviously there's like a lot of miscellaneous.
Can I ask, is this a barrier? What reason is that a barrier right now to your ID?
It outs me, and it puts me into like really dangerous positions.
No, I agree. But what's the barrier for being able to change it to male?
So I have now changed my ID in the state of Maine twice.
Okay.
Once for when it was just a regular state ID, after I got my name changed, and then again once I transferred it to a license from just a state ID. And both times I had the proper paperwork, gave it to them, and they never sent it up to Augusta.
I see. So it didn't get changed.
So it didn't get changed, and then when I called Augusta, they were like, well, we can change it to whatever your birth certificate says, because they didn't send any other paperwork.
Okay.
My birth certificate still says female.
Okay. Now, are there any barriers for you changing that at the moment, or you just haven't gotten around to it? Or?
It's more of just like, it's like $5 every time you have to do it, and
that's a barrier.
It's a barrier.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanting to know.
Yeah.
Because I think that's an important issue for some people. Financial reasons, some states won't allow you to change it still. Yep. There are barriers. So.
I got my license in Florida, and down there I legally can't put anything on my driver's license besides what's on my birth certificate.
Okay, so that's a barrier then.
Yep.
Okay, so that does out you. I mean, here you are, husky-looking fella.
Yep.
And you got a male name, a traditionally male name, and they're looking and there's like female, and like, wait a minute, what's going on? Okay.
Going through airport security, I don't bind, which binding is where you use, it's basically like this really tight mesh kind of material in the front with like stretchy fabric in the back that compresses your chest down to make it appear flat.
So trans men use that to try to have that appearance, yes.
So I found out the hard way that I can't wear one through airport security. It sets off alarms, and automatically you'll be patted down.
Okay.
So I stopped doing
just
that.
wearing a binder.
Just for wearing a binder because
Okay.
it sets off as an abnormality.
Okay.
And then there was also one time where I tried going through with a packer, not knowing it would set it off the alarms. And a packer is basically like a silicone.
The packer tries to give us a bulge.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So I went through wearing that one time,
And that probably
set it off big time. And then there have been other times because when you walk through the scanners, they type in a gender. So it's whatever that person scanning you perceives you as being.
Okay.
So there have been times where I've gone through being perceived as male, and then my chest sets it off, just for simply existing.
I see. Okay.
Or an abnormality goes off in like my pant region, or.
So did that happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's this past time when I was going through, what happened was my back lit up because I had a sweatshirt on in the hood, layered over, set it off, and then my upper waistline went off. So I was pulled aside, and the TSA officer said, "I'm gonna pat down your shoulder, I'm gonna shake out your hood." He did that, and then he said, "I'm gonna pat down the front of your pants." And rather than patting down the front of my pants, he actually stuck his hand inside of my pants.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that is not standard procedure.
No.
Okay.
They're not allowed. I've asked like several different TSA agents, as well as like the director TSA woman for that area. And I was told the only way they're allowed to go underneath your clothing is if you have a shirt tucked into your pants. They're allowed to take their thumb and go along the inside
seams,
of
okay.
like your waistline. They're not allowed to go underneath your boxers like this man did to me. They're not allowed to have their whole hand down.
Did he say anything while he was doing this? I
No.
mean, explain to you what his reasoning for
Nope.
this was? Was there another person witnessing? So even that is out of procedure, isn't it? Because
They have to explain everything they're going to do during a pat down. They have to offer you a private screening. Neither of those things were done.
was this done in front of other people?
Yep, it was done right out like.
And then, of course, you're stuck with, you can't really do anything because
Yeah.
if you cause a scene,
Exactly.
you're
it's
going to
gonna
get
be
in trouble.
In trouble. And I also was like in so much shock. I was like, I don't know what to do.
Sure.
So I like kind of walked away and like texted my mom like panicking. I was like having a really bad anxiety attack. Like I couldn't breathe. I was shaking, and texted my mom like, this just happened. I have no idea what to do. Like, are they allowed to do that? Because I had no idea. And actually, like, the only reason that I probably didn't do what a lot of people do when this stuff happens is, like, because of my mom and, like, my friends backing me with all of this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people just kind of, like, push it under their rug or don't report it because they're afraid to.
Or we might not even know that it is violating procedure, you know?
And, I don't know, I just felt like my mom kind of is like the one who like pushed me and was like, no, you need to report it and we're gonna do this.
So you've reported it. How
Yeah.
did you go about that? What's the process?
So initially I asked one of the supervisors for a report form, which during the time it was not the head supervisor because he was busy with something. It was just like one of the under supervisors, where she told us that they're not allowed to go inside of your clothing. They're allowed to pat the outside only. And she wouldn't give me a report form. She would only give me a comment card.
Which is, yeah.
And then when I was filling that out, the actual head TSA agent for that airport came over to speak with me, where it was very much like he was trying to brush it under the rug. Like, I'm buddies with this guy, so I don't really care what happened to you.
Basically, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So basically, at first he was like, oh, you know, we're allowed to pat down like the front of your pants. And I was like, no, that's not what happened. His hand was in my pants. So then he switched it to, oh, we're allowed to put like our thumb along your waistline when your shirt's tucked in. And I was like, no, my shirt wasn't tucked in and he didn't put his thumb in my pants. It was his whole hand. And
was there any video footage of this?
there was.
Okay.
And after I spoke with the head TSA agent, he said he was going to go review the video. And then he came back out to me while I was sitting at my gate waiting to board my plane and stated that the video did show, in fact, that the man had put his hand in my pants, and his response to that was, oh, he's been working with us for like 20 plus years, he's a good guy, and you know, he does his job well, and you should be thankful that we're so like, I think he said like protective and so thorough, because I know how it is with terrorists nowadays, was his wording.
Okay.
So basically, like, he was like, yeah, you need to just get over it, and you should be happy that we basically sexually assaulted you in front of an airport full of people.
Right, because we're preventing terrorists, of course. Is this, I mean, did you say you were trans to him? I mean, did you?
No, but it was outed by when I went through the initial, or I did say that I was trans to the head TSA agent, not the agent who had stuck his hand in my pants. And I tend to get a lot of weird looks when I'm at the airport, specifically because I never bind in the airport. So people are looking at me like, okay, you have facial hair and your voice is kind of deep, but like there's something on your chest.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's like a pretty obvious thing, and like the way that the man had done it, it very much felt like he was trying to figure out what was in my pants.
Yes, right. It didn't feel like a legitimate, yeah,
No.
I mean, there's nothing legitimate about that, so. Wow, and you know, so I also learned that you left home at 16, and for you to be doing that, there had to be some stuff going on. Is this causing some problem, distress?
I've experienced a lot of abuse from my family. I grew up with an alcoholic, schizophrenic father. So I grew up in like a really volatile home setting. And also when I was in middle school and very beginning of high school, I had a friend whose older brother had sexually assaulted me for over a year. So having had like all of these experiences, going to the airport into a place where you should be safe and you shouldn't have to worry about someone like triggering these past experiences and causing like panic attacks, having something like suddenly happen is just so much worse. It's not like if I was on the street being like catcalled or something, where like that itself is kind of triggering, but like when you're just not expecting it, you're in an area where you feel like you should be safe.
And a person of authority. Yeah, there's
like someone where you wouldn't expect it from. It just seems so much more like violent than it would be from someone walking down the street or something.
And that's what I'm thinking of when I'm thinking of these airports. I'm thinking of a couple of things. I don't think they're really equipped for trans folks. I'm not so sure they're very equipped for folks with trauma either. It just seems like, you know, unfortunately you see so many articles and so many things going wrong. You know, you're traveling, you're stressed out, they're stressed out. So, I mean, Zach, I try to be positive in my show, and like, what would you, if you were to train these folks, what would some of the guidance you'd want to give them?
I mean, I feel like the idea of assuming a person's gender is
even just that we need to be looking at.
We need to be looking at the fact that these scanners are flagging people's genitalia as like an alarm. Like that's a system that needs to be worked out and redone entirely. The fact that these machines are gendered and then these people are just like stereotyping what they see for someone.
It's sort of gender profiling, you know, really,
Like we need to change that. Like a simple, okay, what should I be expecting like when this scans you?
Now, and also when they've pat you in the past, what was that like? What's
in the past? It was
down?
Always over my clothing.
Okay.
Never once have I ever had them go under my clothing besides this time. And
now, and was the patting down intimate as well, though?
Yeah, I've set off. This past time, it was my waistline that had gone off. I've had my actual like crotch light up bright yellow because I had worn a packer through, and. No, it was, they came over, patted down my thighs, and then took a metal scanner, like a metal detector.
Right. So it just sounds, I mean, of course we do want them to be cautious and thorough, but we also want them to be sensitive to folks with trauma and sensitive to trans folks. Just sensitive, period. I think when you're doing something, you can get so accustomed to it, you don't even think about what it's like to be the person receiving it. And also bathrooms are another issue in airports. Don't you agree?
Yeah, it's definitely terrifying flying into a state that you're not from because you have no idea what their laws are down there. You
Right.
have no idea
It's not universal. Right.
what to expect. You have no idea what what kind of cultures these other people in the airports have been coming from. And they're just kind of like wide open and they just kind of like loop through each other. So it's like you have no idea what could happen to you in there and no one would know or see.
Now, in your day-to-day life, Zach, are people gendering you correctly?
For the most part, I still do get misgendered on occasion, but it's a lot more rare over the past few months.
Kind of jarring when it happens?
Yeah, it's definitely that. I get a lot of people who just kind of don't know how to gender me. Like, I'll get someone who will look at my face and then be really confused and then like stare at my chest for like 5 minutes and then like look back at my face. Like, I can't tell, what are you?
What do you do? Would you address it directly?
It almost always happens with like these quick little interactions, like taking customers' orders at work or going to like a restaurant with a waiter or going through like a checkout line at the grocery store. So it's kind of just like,
why bother?
Why bother? These people are probably not the kind of people I'd want around me anyway, so what do I care what they think?
It's a tough spot to be in, and I think the traveling one, and trans folks, you know, even though being trans isn't a tragedy, we often do have trauma for some of the things that you brought up, you know, very early on in this conversation. What would you like to tell people about your experience being trans, Zach?
I guess it depends on like the kind of audience I'm speaking to. I guess like if it's like other trans people, I guess it's the fact of like it's terrifying to speak out when stuff happens to you that's wrong, but at the same time, no one's gonna make any change if we don't. So like, honestly, doing the stuff that I've been doing over the past like 2 years since coming out is some of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life. And there's nothing scarier to me than going out and doing this stuff. But at the same time, it's so worth it because if we don't keep making noise and we don't keep going out there and we don't keep fighting and advocating for ourselves, nothing's ever gonna change.
Right. Yeah, then there'll be just sort of the lingering fear and the ignorance and you know, the point of this show really is just, hey, you know, we're ordinary people wanting pretty much the same things as everybody else. And then today we brought up a really good, you know, point with the airports. What else though? I've got you here. I'm going to assume I've got another 10 minutes or so. And what would you want to tell people as a young, I mean, you're 18, you've been on your own for 2 years, so you had to do that very young. I mean, most people, I think, you know, 18 is standard, but most people stay home longer than that. So what's it been like navigating that?
Honestly, I have no idea where I would be if I didn't have the amazing support system that I have. I guess I'm a lot luckier than a lot of kids I know who in similar situations, because from what I've seen, a lot of the trans masculine guys I know who are my age are often end up homeless or dropping out of school. So I guess I'm kind of just like actually really lucky in that regard.
Well, in our community, like, you know, Maine Transnet, I think they've kind of taken you under their wing. You've got some people really adore you. Between
like the other board members of Maine Transnet and kind of like all of the family that I've made like within inside of it, like others in that group, I got like really blessed. And it definitely makes it a lot easier to handle all of it. And it definitely is still like some of the most stressful things I probably will ever deal with. But at the same time, like I have all of these people holding me up.
Yes.
I know I won't fail, and I know.
Well, you're okay. It's okay to fail now and then, because that's.
I have them to pick me back up.
Yes. Yes. And failing is part of growth. It's part of learning. So that's okay. But I mean, so I like how you're pointing out. You know, you can't do this alone. You need support, and we're very fortunate to have Maine Transnet. Can you think of other support networks maybe that we could highlight? I can't think of the group, but it's up in Bangor.
that basically they're like an LGBT youth center
Right.
in Bangor that.
And then there's Glisten and Outright is another resource for teens. I think in Maine, I think, if someone is struggling or you yourself are watching and struggling, Maine Transnet's probably the best place to start.
We have groups all over the state of Maine, basically. We have ones in Portland, we have ones in Brunswick, we have them in...
Oh, Bangor,
we have them in Bangor, and
then there's some online...
We're trying to extend it now. Our hope is by the end of next year to have a group up near like Fort Kent.
Yeah. Oh,
that
absolutely.
Area.
Maine's a big state. Yeah. So, anything else you wanted to bring up that we should have touched on and we just haven't?
No, just the fact that like people can't stay silent when this stuff happens. They need to speak out.
I can imagine, Zach, because all I can think of is, I'm trying to think if this was happening to me, and I'm going to assume, okay, they know what they're doing, they're the authorities, and then of course you're just stunned. I mean, this can't really be happening. It is happening. Is it supposed to be happening? And then if you were to, in the moment, have made a big deal about it, it could have backfired and you could have gotten in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a problem of like advocating for yourself when you're trans is really difficult because the whole time you're constantly terrified of like, oh my God, am I making a big deal out of something and saying that something is because I'm trans when it could possibly have nothing to do with that?
That's a good
point.
Am
I crying wolf or?
It's maybe not crying wolf. I think that folks who are marginalized or typically oppressed do get a bit reactive, but with good reason. It's not as though it just came out of nowhere.
It just makes it difficult because everyone thinks we're pulling the trans card.
Right.
When in actuality, like, no, you just need to continue fighting for yourself. Even if you have like this constant voice in the back of your head saying like, oh, careful, you're gonna sound like you're pulling the trans card. Like, it's not true. And even if people are thinking that way, they're not the people who would be supporting you anyway.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think trans people tend to be very resilient, and I think anyone who's being oppressed, it does happen so frequently, and I think what happens too is good people I don't think they believe it sometimes. I think because they're good and then they just assume the stuff isn't going on and then it is, and then if someone is being reactive, they're not realizing, well, it's happened like 9 times and now you're the 10th or something, So you're right, you need to advocate, and then, the person has to try to balance, okay, this happens a lot, doesn't mean it's happening right now, but that doesn't mean we can't bring it up and highlight it. So you highlighted something very important. And so pending on that, I think this is a good way to end this. So viewers, I really thank you for watching. This is a real issue. Airport security, of course we want it, we need it, but also we need to temper that with folks who have trauma, folks who are gender variant, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things we need to be considering, but maybe this will help get the ball rolling, Zach. So thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next month.